So when we write applications, we're going to want to create reusable components for one of two reasons, either to make our code more readable or to make our code base more manageable. Usually it's both of these things. Now, QML provides us with this ability. We have two different ways we can do this. We can either create custom items or custom components. Now, there's one very apparent difference between these two ways, and that is what the root element is going to be. For our custom items, the root element is going to be an item type or derived from the item type, and our components will be a component type. We're going to see more of this in examples. Now, before we go through how each one's configured, I just want to say for custom items, these are going to be defined in separate files, and they're only going to contain one main item. For instance, if we wanted to make a button, we could define a file called simplebutton.qml with a capital S, which is going to contain all the visuals and properties of our button. We're going to look at that in just a minute. Now, these custom items, once we've created them, we can use them in the same manner as a rectangle or text or any other standard item. We can also associate version numbers with these if we want to have version changes. Now, as for the components, these are generally used with models and views for generating the contents. And you can kind of think of these as if they're templates for items. We're going to talk more about them in our next module, which is going to be about model view. So this is going to be our first custom item example. We're going to make this very simple button. To begin, we're going to make a new file, and we're going to name it simplebutton.qml with a capital S and a capital B. And we're going to put this file in the same directory as our main.qml. Now, our simple button is a rectangle and a mouse area. The mouse area fills the rectangle, and the rectangle's color is going to be dependent on whether or not the mouse area is pressed. So if it's pressed, the color is going to be light gray. Otherwise, the color is going to be gray. Now, here in our example, we're going to use our new custom item. Here we have a window. Here's our custom item being instantiated. You can see we use it exactly like any other QML type. The name we used for our file, simplebutton.qml with the capital S, capital B, is exactly what we use to make our item. And since our item is based off a rectangle, we're able to set any of the properties of that root element, which in our case is the rectangle. So we can set anchors, width, height, color, radius, and the other properties that the rectangle has. Now, while we're talking about properties, I know it's been a little while since we've talked about properties. I did mention this in our first class, but it's been a couple weeks, so let's do a quick refresher. Now, any time that we want to add a custom property, we're going to follow the format property, type, name, and then optionally we can bind a default value to it. We can also make properties read-only by putting the read-only keyword before property. So far, our button is just a rectangle, but most buttons in real applications have text. So let's go ahead and add a label to our button. We are going to add a label by creating a text, and we are going to expose the text property as a property called button label text. Now, as seen here, we have a new property button label text, and this is the string that has an initial value of button text. But once this property changes, what's going to happen is the property button label text that belongs to our rectangle will be updated, and the text items, the text button label, its text property will not be updated. And that's because what we're doing here is we're essentially going to be breaking this binding. So instead of using the type string, we want to use the special type alias here. Now, alias is recommended anytime you're going to create a binding to the property of a child item. In this example, we've changed the type of our button label text to be an alias instead of a string. And now it's going to work as you expected. The property, when something is using this object and it asks to change the button label text, the changes or requests for the data will be forwarded to our button labels text property. It's important to remember to use alias anytime that you're accessing the property of a subchild that you want to expose it. So now if we look at how we've assigned this value, you can see that we assign the value just like any other property of our simple button. We just simply provide a new text string and it automatically gets updated accordingly. Now, of course, in addition to custom properties, we can also have custom signals. So let's take a look at those. Now, we've talked about signals before in the context of the signals provided by things like the mouse area or our multi-touch QML stuff. Now, we've noticed that all of these have an on, like for the mouse, it has an on-clicked handler. And this corresponds to when the clicked signal is emitted from the mouse area. Now, all the standard items, they'll have predefined signals and handlers for them, but we can also add our own. And it's really easy to do. The syntax for this is going to be using the keyword signal, followed by a name. And then the rest of it is going to be the function signature. So if we don't have anything, we're just going to open and close parentheses, like you could see in the clicked example. And if we have any variables that we want to pass into those, we'll set them up like a function signature with their type and then a name, comma, type name, and so forth. Now, it's important to note that our custom signals may not begin with a capital letter. And this is because when we make a signal, there's going to be an automatically generated handler that is going to use the format on signal name beginning with a capital letter. So if we look at our example clicked again here, we see we have on clicked as its handler. For our signal below that selected row, we have two variables coming into it. So in our handler on selected row, we're going to have two arguments passed into that, and they will be accessible using index and table ID as their variable names. Now, to make a custom signal for a custom item, the first thing that we need to do is we're going to need to assign an ID to our root item. And this makes it really easy to reference the signal internally and clearly indicate where the signal is coming from. So here we have a clicked signal. If we were to just in the mouse area, when the clicked happens, just say clicked, it's going to automatically try to refer to the mouse areas clicked. So we want to make sure to fully qualify it by setting an ID. Now, while we're talking about the root item's ID, it's a common practice to set the root element's name to be the root element type plus root. That way it's easy for you to find what the root item is. Another common name is root that people use for this root item. So after we assign that, what we're going to do is in our mouse area, when we have our on clicked, we're going to use the name of the root area, which is button root, and we're going to use button root.click to emit this signal. We can also, since our clicked is a bool, it's going to have a checked. We're going to send with it the is selected property. And then when we handle that, we'll be able to use the checked variable name to check the variable that was passed to us. Now, the signals and handlers go in pairs. So whenever we create a signal, we're going to have a handler that's created automatically with the format on, signal name with a capital letter. Again, these are automatically created, and the values that are referenced are the same names that are used in the signal definition. So if we look at our example on the left here, we have our simple button where it has a clicked where it's not returning anything. So here on clicked, we're able to log to our console that the click happened. So we just log the string clicked. On the right side, we have a signal with a return. And this return, you can see in the signal definition is name checked. So on clicked, we are going to console log checked, and then whether or not that variable, it'll return true or false for that variable. We're using the name checked again, which is the one defined in the signal itself.
Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more, please subscribe to our channel and check out the free QML programming course on our website. The link is in the description.